Wow, do we have a big name for you today on a Burn Your Boats podcast? Today we host Kati Fettke in the studio. Kati is, quite simply put, one of the leading voices in the real estate industry in the United States today. She is the co-host of the On the Market podcast by BiggerPockets. She is the founder of the Real Wealth Network. That's a global brand. She is the best-selling author of books like Retire Rich with Rentals and The Only Woman in the Room. She is the founder of Influence Makers, where Kati helps women enhance their brands and their public speaking skills. Kati is an absolute industry leader. She is a speaker on all the major conferences. Kati also shares her insights on platforms like CNN, Fox, AB7. Kati is a real estate maverick. She is a syndicator, she is a developer, and she's raised over $140 million and put that into various real estate projects. So join us today for her expert insights, her inspiring life story, and actionable tips so that you can enhance your real estate journey and you can grow your wealth in the knowledge that Kati has had tremendous success, but Kati has also had numerous knockbacks. She's had to pick herself off the canvas 1,000 times. To be successful, you have to be resilient. And Kati's story is just an absolutely inspiring, epic journey of resilience. So without further ado, I welcome Kati Fettke to the Burn Your Boats podcast. Right, welcome everybody to a new episode of the Burn Your Boats podcast. Today is probably the highlight. Certainly the biggest honor I think that we've had as host of the podcast, that we get to present Kati Fettke. Kati Fettke is a good friend of mine, and I'm going to run through some of her background as we get started, so you, the listener, have got some understanding of her capacity and her ability to answer the questions that we're about to ask. Kati is the host of the BiggerPockets On the Market show. She's a co-host over there. She is the frequent guest host of the flagship BiggerPockets podcast. She is the host of the Real Wealth show and the Real Estate News show. Her previous two guests that she has worked with were Ken McElroy and Robert Kiyosaki. Now, that's in the last 7 days, right? You are the founder of the Real Wealth Network, which is a global brand and a leading direct investment platform in the nation for investors who want to invest out of state and want to have trusted teams to work with. You're the founder of Grow Developments, a very successful syndicator. You're a perennial guest in the nation's largest real estate conferences like Limitless, IMN, BPCon, Better Life. That's just to name a few, Kati, right? You're the author of the best-selling book, Retire Rich with Rentals, and The Only Woman in the Room. And you are soon to release a book on the BiggerPockets publishing platform called Scaling Smart, with your amazing husband, Rich Fettke. And you're also the founder of Influence Makers, which is a mastermind designed to help women develop their brands and enhance their public speaking. You've also worked with major TV networks like CNN, Fox, CTV, ABC7, CNBC. I've seen you go head to head with Robert Schiller. So that's not everybody can say that, Kati. You're also an aggressive personal real estate investor in building up your own real estate portfolio. As a syndicator and developer, you raised and deployed over $140 million. You're an amazing mom to Krista and Karina. You're married to the coolest dude in every room he walks into, Rich Fettke. And overall, you're an amazing educator and you're an inspiration. I'm honored to say, Kati, you are my friend. And that is my introduction to you today.
Oh my gosh, you're going to make me cry over here. I seriously, you forgot to mention we're partners on a Tulum property.
That's the least of your successes, I would say. But we are partners. Kati and I are partners on a property we're having built out in Tulum. So that's a fun project as well, Kati. Listen, Kathy, our podcast, Burn Your Boats, is largely focused on educating listeners on kind of understanding life-altering importance of investing and saving and investing for the future, right? So that you can live a financially free future. So not just for you and your family. You're very well known in fact, you're one of the absolute market leaders in the nation of, providing data and market analysis. That's not what we're going to do today. If you want that, you can find Kathy in all the places we just mentioned, and she's going to give you that. Today, Kathy, we're going to work on your mindset. We're going to work on your resilience. We're going to work on what it is that built and made Kathy Fettke into what she is today. Right. So we're going to ask you a series of questions, and I'll ask the first one, and we've got a lot, so we're going to shut up, ask you the questions, and see what you've got to say, right? First question I'd like to ask you today, Kathy, is we'd like to delve a little bit deeper into your concept of overcoming difficulties. From your experience, what differentiates people who have successful outcomes from those who struggle to get started, Kathy? What do you think are your key responses to overcoming difficulty?
Oh, I think the short answer is I have failed a lot, and I am embarrassed by some of those failures, but you can walk away with your head down, or you can pick yourself up and do better. And, you look at a toddler, they don't have the ego issues that adults have. They fall down all the time, and they get up and they learn to walk, and then they learn to run, and, that's part of life.
Yeah.
So, I was one of the first to syndicate when money became harder to get in 2009. There wasn't a lot of help for me then. I had to just sort of be a pioneer there and forge forth. And I did really, really good deals, and I did some doozies. And it was hard to be in a position I am where I'm well known and have failures. It's one thing to fail when no one knows who you are. But when people know who you are, and in some cases, you've lost money, it is hard to pick yourself up again. But the way I dealt with that, and the way that a lot of people don't deal with it, is I was just honest. I would go to the investors and say, wow, we didn't expect this, or we've learned this, and on the next deal, we're going to do better because we've learned this. You've got a lot of syndicators today who are failing, and they're afraid to tell their investors. And then the investors get really upset, right? They want to know what's going on. But they're pretty forgiving when they know that you gave it your all, that you weren't cheating anybody. You just, maybe didn't have the information then that you have now.
Well, we're firm believers, Kathy, in being upfront, and, that happiness is when expectation meets reality. Mm-hmm. And so if you can communicate constantly where you are, people are going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's an amazing first step in building resilience, is just being honest. Then you sleep a little bit better at night, So that's a great answer. Clark.
Yeah, I tip my cap to that, Kathy. I've had a lot of discussions recently with some syndicators, and they're having very difficult discussions right now, Zoom calls with multiple investors, a lot of LPs. And you kind of have two ways to go about it. You can be authentic, like you just mentioned, and just say, guys, this is kind of what we projected, and, we need to work together. But I've also heard the other side of the coin too, where they get on a Zoom call and they're like, look, here's where we're at. We're not hitting rent expectations, overruns on construction. Sorry, you knew the risk when you signed up. And, if you want to put in more money on a capital call that we're asking for, great. If you don't, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And there's not a lot of empathy, right? And I can't imagine how, being on the other side of the table as an LP, to hear something like that and want to continue to buy into this person, their brand. So, I love that you said that. You brought up the thing about the baby, right? Falling and you skin your knee and you get back up, right? And you're not really embarrassed or worried yet as we grow older. And, I almost feel like that we're not scared of failing. We're scared of other people seeing that we fail, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of falls into your analogy with the baby. So what are you've dealt with so many investors, over the years through Real Wealth Network. Kind of give me a feel for some of the kind of psychological challenges and barriers that a lot of the investors that you've seen through your own network, through your own business, that they've faced and kind of what the desired outcome was. And also, too, what is the importance that you kind of place on getting, investing, and starting earlier? I'm just interested in kind of some of those psychological barriers that you see every single day on your conversations.
To me, fear and lack of ability to move forward, that analysis paralysis, it's simply a matter of lack of information and just doing it. So I've always told people, just take the next step to get the information you need to have this conversation with your fear. Like, okay, what is it I'm afraid of? Oh, okay. You want more analysis. Okay. We'll do that. So analysis paralysis is just being frozen and not being able to do something. Whereas analysis is very, very important. So anything you can do to continue to move forward on your journey. Rich and I are rock climbers, and you look up a cliff and it's like, how on earth am I going to get up there? There's no way to know until you just do it. And hopefully you've got enough, knowledge about, my rope is secure and I'm going to be okay if I fall and I've got a good belayer and so forth. So you can go without really knowing how you're going to do it. So just, again, making sure that the correct analysis is in place, and then you just take those baby steps. You're just not going to know exactly where you end up. That's how life is, right? It's kind of a blind journey, but have as much as you possibly can in preparation for that journey. Your water, your partner, whoever it's going to be. So that has always been our approach at Real Wealth is, oh, you're stuck. You just need more information. That's all. That's easy. Yeah. There's plenty of information out there. Let's just get you some more. So we do a ton of education every single week. You guys know, you've been part of that educational process. What more can we give you to just make this journey a little bit more exciting? Yeah. And I'll give you just one example. This was 2009. I mean, wouldn't we all love to go back to 2009 and just start investing, because real estate had just bottomed out, like historically bottomed out. But if you were there in 2009, you didn't have the eyesight we have now. It was scary. We thought we were not going to be the United States of America. People were stocking up on food. It took a lot of courage to do anything at that time in the depths of the recession. But I did have a couple come into my office in Walnut Creek, our little tiny Real Wealth office back then. And the husband was like, I know there's deals out there and I want to do this, but my wife, she doesn't. And she would just burst into tears in my office. And I was like, oh, okay. She's scared. Of course, this is a scary time. Yeah. So I looked at her and said, I think you need to go. It was the time we were promoting Dallas. I said, you need to go by yourself without him, without him telling you what to do. You go and meet with our teams there and go walk the streets and walk through these houses. Talk to the Chamber of Commerce, talk to the neighbors, find out for yourself. And she did. She came back and like, I'm buying 5 houses. She didn't have anyone pressuring her, and she got the information she needed. She was able to overcome it. Now imagine how, they just kept buying, 2009, 10, 11. I mean, it worked out well for them, but she needed to comfort her fear. Rich has a book on it called Extreme Success. And he's like, fear is your friend. It's warning you. It's trying to protect you. So don't, reject it. Just listen to it. Oh, you want this? Okay. I'll get you that.
That's amazing advice. I have a little story of during COVID, a good friend of mine, we sat down, we had some beers down in 6 feet apart, down in a local park. And he's like, David, what is it you do? And I told him all about, buying, renovating homes and building up real estate portfolios. And he was like 44. He was just finishing up paying his college debt and stuff like that. And he turned around to me and he said to me, he's like, David, so what you do sounds, all this investing and buying real estate sounds so risky. And I turned around to him. I said, the irony is I look at you and what you're doing is super risky to me, in that he was a W-2 earner. He was, looking for that promotion, hopefully a year from now, playing it safe. And quite honestly, it's a more challenging route. And so it leads us on to the next question then. Kathy, what importance or emphasis do you place on investors, particularly in getting started early? You know, I have a term that I use, a wealth algorithm called debt by time by scale. Time is the middle. You don't grow without all of those three inputs, you know, taking on debt, having the time to do it and do it in enough scale. What do you think of the importance of getting started early? Because so many people ignore it in their 20s and 30s and even in their 40s.
Yeah. Well, in the 20s and 30s, you're not generally used to luxuries. So you can live on a little bit less. You're used to it.
Yeah.
So it's the ideal time, because what often will happen is if you get a $100,000 job right out of college, well, then you might get a car, then a nice apartment and some nice clothes and take some vacations and go to $1,000 concerts. And all of that is wonderful and fun. But, you know, eventually then your lifestyle is going to keep growing. Then you're going to get married, and maybe the person you married really likes that lifestyle. And then you're going to have kids, and the lifestyle just keeps growing, and it's really hard to get ahead. But when you're young, you can sleep on a couch, you know, you can do things that you might not want to do when you're older. When Rich and I started, I wouldn't say we were young, but I guess kind of. We were 30. I guess that's like really young to me today. But you know, you might call that late, but we house hacked. We got a house and we turned it into a fourplex. We had so many people living with us. I wrote about this in my book, Retire Rich with Rentals. We were definitely on the verge of the temptation to spend our money, because Rich had become a personal coach. He was really well renowned. He got a book deal with Simon & Schuster. It was $150,000 cash in our pocket. Like, wow. It was amazing, right? It was like money we had never seen. And it would be really easy to spend that money. There's so many things you can spend it on. And so we fortunately, and I fortunate and unfortunate, but at that time I wrote about it in my book, he got melanoma. We blew through our savings through all the medical bills that we had. And it was a wake up call just at the right time.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my gosh, no matter what you do, we were doing everything right. Everything that our financial planner was telling us, buckets of money, savings and emergencies and investing, doing all the things you're supposed to do. And we blew through it in a few months. You know, it was like, okay, this plan's not going to work. We need something else. And that's when, you know, I started just renting out rooms in the house and kind of covered our expenses. And what a feeling, you know, what a feeling to like have your expenses be covered by other people just renting from you.
It's funny, Kathy, when life happens, right? Everything's going well. It's kind of going how you planned. And then something happens to Rich and you have medical bills who's going to plan for something like that? And it's funny, your back goes against the wall. And what do? You start thinking outside the box. You start renting out rooms. You start doing things that, you know, I hear all the time, people don't want to rent out rooms because, well, I don't like living with roommates, or, you know, I don't know them that well, and, you know, fill in the blank with many excuses.
Exactly.
Yet all of a sudden your back's against the wall, and all of a sudden living with roommates isn't quite so bad anymore, right? And so we talk about this so much on our podcast about, you know, delaying your gratification, not maybe going out and spending that money when you could, you know, you could get a nicer car, a newer boat, or whatever it may be. And you guys unfortunately had to deal, you know, life punched you in the face, and you took it and you figured out a solution and you moved forward. And love to hear that. I want to kind of pivot just slightly, because this is kind of important to me selfishly. My girlfriend is successful. She has a really good job. She's investing in a lot of properties, but I think she has a hesitation to kind of want to go out and really think bigger. Right. And so I look to you and I'm like, wow, you know, Kathy, you're out there. I mean, David spent the first 28 minutes of this podcast naming off all the accolades that you have, and he probably could have spent a lot longer. You have a book called The Only Woman in the Room, and you have a mastermind that's centered around kind of building, empowering women to go out and get on those stages. And to the point, you know, you mentioned in a lot of these big conferences, you're the only woman on the stage, right? Talk to us a little bit about, you know, kind of how that feels. Like if you're talking to my girlfriend right now and you're the only woman in the green room and behind the curtain, right? Talk to us a little bit about kind of how that feels, and, you know, maybe some stereotypes that you've had to kind of overcome over the years that maybe if it was me standing behind that curtain that I wouldn't necessarily have to face. I'm just curious. Talk a little bit about those kind of challenges that you face being a woman in a role where you're at the front of front of the audience?
Well, for me, it's just been super easy. That's the best way I can describe it, because it's my superpower, I guess you could say. It's my strength. I studied broadcasting. That was when I was 18, somebody took me into a newsroom in San Francisco just to kind of watch the news live. And I was like, that's it. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I later learned that I didn't really want to be the bearer of bad news every day. And I thought, how can I do the opposite and be the bearer of good news? Which is generally people don't want, but when it's about money, then they're more interested. So that took off. But if I were to talk to your girlfriend, I would just really want to find out what her superpower is. And it might not be being on stages. It might not be podcasts. It might be something else. So everybody just has their unique ability, and that's what they should be doing. And when they're doing it, it feels easy. I was talking to my daughter, Krista. You guys know Krista. And she's 24. And she goes, Mom, Gateway Investors, they're an international investment company. And she's with 2 other male partners in that. And she goes, I realized that this group kind of needed some leadership. They needed some structure. They need meeting rhythms. And so she's kind of taken the structure that we have at Real Wealth and brought it to Gateway Investors. And she's like, it's so easy for me. And so she's found her superpower. She's also very good on camera. She is an actress from her past. Yes. But what's easy for her is organizing people and leading people. She's a natural leader and loves it. So that's all. People just need to really know themselves. Know thyself. That is probably the most important thing. There's so many personality tests to just dig. What am I great at? And it's usually the thing that you just like to do when you're not getting paid, that you do on the weekends. Like I'm ridiculously obsessed with economics. I don't know why, but on Saturday mornings, you're going to find me sitting outside by the pool listening to an economic podcast.
Yeah.
I don't need to, but I do. So, there's something called the Kolbe test. That's super helpful to understand how you function, how you operate, what you're strong at, and focus on that. I bet there are a lot of women who do belong on stages, but there's fear stopping them. And that's a whole nother topic. There's lots of ways to break through that fear if that indeed is your superpower. I'm scared all the time, you guys. When I started my podcast, I had to do 20 push-ups.
Oh, David, we don't do the push-ups. We need to do more push-ups.
You know what? Taylor Swift is scared every single night of her life. There's no part of her walks out on stage and she's just like, I got this. Every single night she's rattling with fear as she walks out onto the stage. We will never walk a mile in the shoes of a lady in our business, but there certainly is stereotypes, Kathy. And I don't share this because quite frankly, I've worked with you for over a decade within Real Wealth Network, and I know Kelly, I know Missy, I know all of the amazingly strong women in that group. I've got to tell you, I'm scared of these ladies. These ladies these are not wallflowers, put it that way. Right? But I don't differentiate, as a male. I've never felt a gender role in our business, albeit that I go to a conference, and I think this, alludes to Clark's question. We go to a conference and it's largely men. And, there are more and more women. You remember the very first IMNs as an example, right? A lot of women were in those support roles, and now there's more and more women just up on the stage doing what they do. And I've never differentiated between a knowledgeable woman and a knowledgeable man. I've just never had that personally. But there is these stereotypes that somehow women are less risk adverse, right? Do you think that's a misconception? And I'm talking about as real estate investors. I'm not talking about as, podcast hosts or anything else. I'm talking about real estate investors now. There's this misconception that women are somehow, it's my wife wouldn't let me do it. How many times I've heard that one on a Monday morning when somebody wants to rescind a contract to buy a property? But that's not my reality. My reality is that about 60% of the decision makers in households with whom I've done business have been the male, the lead decision maker, and about 40 to 45% maybe have been the female. What's your thoughts on these kind of misconceptions that somehow women are less are more risk adverse, or they're more conservative. What do you have to say about that?
Well, we've come a long way is all I can say. I think it was in the 80s that a woman was allowed to even have her own bank account or checking account.
Oh my gosh.
It's awful when you really look at the history of what women were allowed to do. They couldn't take title to my grandma couldn't vote. Let's go back to that. So we've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. We know we still have not had a female president. Now that could be changing, but we have a long way to go, and we have to overcome what is kind of in our DNA almost of, women have been pushed down for many, many, many centuries. Yeah. And there's fear inside ourselves, just like animals intuitively know what to do or not to do to stay alive and to stay safe. And before, maybe just a generation ago, if you were too strong, you would fail. Yeah. Your husband wouldn't allow it. People didn't like it. So there's something in our genetics that tells us to be safe and to survive in this world. We do have to be a little bit more passive. So we're overcoming that. And the more that women stand up, and the more, I want to even say, it's not even so much about the woman, it's about the man. I'm going to probably get in trouble for saying this.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I really feel like it's what men have allowed. Because physically we are weaker. And again, there are women who are stronger than some men, but generally speaking. So it's really, for me, it's been the men who have opened the doors for me. And starting with my husband, when I was afraid to speak and really didn't want to, he was like, but you have a lot to say. And he signed me up for Toastmasters, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to speak. I was scared. But, he was so gentle with me and coaching me to be better and to constantly grow. So, the first Toastmasters, for anyone who doesn't know, that's a training for, if you want to learn to speak, go there. I got up and said one sentence and almost fainted and died, but I got through it. And then I said a paragraph the next week. They ease you in. And that's the way most things need to be. I could not be on a conference stage my first time, although Krista, my daughter, came with me and keynoted with me just last month. Her very first talk ever was in front of 300 people. I'm so proud of her. But generally, you want to ease your way in and just one little step at a time, so that after a year of Toastmasters, I did speak at their national convention, and I still wanted to throw up and die, but I got through it. So each time, you build that courage muscle. So the more that women do that, the more it will open up the door for others. And I look back at the failures I've had and the embarrassments. And if at the end of the day, through all of that, I've opened the door, just like you guys have opened, just like Rich has opened the door for me, for more women to come out and feel brave enough to be strong and not die because of it, then hallelujah. We still live in a world where there are countries where if a woman speaks up, she will die. And so that's a reality. Yeah. That's when we're overcoming.
It's very interesting to hear you say that it's almost like this congenital predisposition to saying, keeping your head down, keeping your head to the parapet, for fear that, you're going to get, disliked for being strong, and there may be a ways to go here, but within our industry and within real estate, I don't wear high heels. You know what I mean? So I don't get to have this concept, but I know that almost everyone I know, and in my, 52, I'm in the working world at least, 30 years, and I've never once heard somebody, not one time, describe a woman, in any kind of negative, way, because of her gender. Only ever because of maybe the particular person was likable or dislikable. We're going to pivot, Kathy, because we wanted to give you time, particularly because you are the most successful woman in real estate that I know. And I truly believe that you are the leading voice. You and maybe Barbara Corcoran. I've said this to you privately, but I'm going to say it now. I believe you are the most empowering and the most empowered female voice in real estate in this country. There's not very many people who I would say that about. And so pivoting here, what do you think your personal qualities were that have been the main driver of your personal success, Kathy? Because is it your resilience? Because look, you're a fighter. You've been punched in the gut 1,000 times. You've been laid down on the canvas with blood coming out of your nose, but you keep getting up. You keep getting up. Can you tell me, just personally, it could be any reason, how do you keep getting up? And what's that force behind you?
I wish I could describe it. But it must be my purpose, because I just won't give up. And also it is the support of my husband. So when I failed hard multiple times, and he would, I don't want to say let me, but he was never controlling. It's like, I want to do this. And he'd be like, great, do it. And how could I support you in that? And then when I would fail, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, you just lost us a bunch of money, no more leading, I'm taking over. It was never that. It was like, it's only money. Perhaps it's that. Perhaps it's from the support that I still am loved, by the people that matter most to me, my family, whether I succeed or whether I fail. So that is just removed. It's just removed. So then I get to just do what I want and that my soul calls me to do. And like I said, also to just be humble. I've been humbled so many times and like, wow, I screwed that up. And it was hard because in the very beginning, I sort of became famous early, like too soon. Yeah. I had a radio show in San Francisco and it just took off, and I would have events and have rooms full of people, and people would tell me, it's a very diverse culture in San Francisco. So I would have all men in these meetings of, from India, from China, from just where women aren't necessarily empowered in some of these places, at least not back then. This was 30 years ago. And people would say, oh, these men are never going to listen to you. You're a woman, and they would. And then when I did something that failed, and it was like, oh my gosh, I've just misrepresented women so bad. Here, these men listened to me, and then I failed, and now women are not going to have a chance. I took that responsibility, and interestingly enough, they would still come back, even after maybe losing money in a deal or not getting the best property. Again, this is 30 years ago. I was just learning. But I would ask myself, why are people following me when I've only been doing this a year? And I think that is where I would just kind of come back and go, they just chose it. They could have chosen anyone to follow or to work with, and they chose me. So I don't know why, and I didn't have the experience. But I guess I learned to sort of remove it as it was their choice. They could have invested with anyone. They invested with me. Now I do have the experience to back it up, but I didn't then.
So to put an exclamation point on that question, I asked you what your resiliency was and how you keep on getting off the canvas. You mentioned your support network. You mentioned that you had the freedom to fail. And you also mentioned there that people didn't blame you personally, and that you could see these three things working.
Well, they did. I mean, people did blame me, but I think the conversation was, it's kind of like if you and I did a deal and the deal didn't go well, is it your fault? Is it my fault? Or is it just the deal didn't go well?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, a lot of deals don't go well because of economic conditions.
Not the deal goes well. And you go to a financial planner, and if things don't go well, was it the financial planner's fault? Or, you chose that person, and somehow we're trained in the stock market that you're going to lose money, but you stay in long enough that you're going to be okay after. But people are trained differently. So it's kind of like you said, as long as you're upfront, like, I'm giving you all this information, and this is all the due diligence we did. This is what we know. This is our team. Now we're going to go on this boat together.
Yeah.
We've all made that decision together, right? I don't know if that makes sense. I guess I sort of took the burden off of me, which I took for so many years, of I'm responsible for everything and everyone's decision. And then it was like, but am I,
That's huge. What you've just said there for anybody listening, that is absolutely massive in that, some things work out, some things don't. At the end of the day, Kathy, we win more than we lose. Most things work themselves out over time. That's another big one. Sometimes things look bad, maybe initially, but if we stay in for a long time, these previously bad situations iron themselves out. It's just a timing thing. It's not always gone wrong. It's yet to work itself out. And so a follow-on question, what is the importance of risk taking, in your opinion, to your success? Can you possibly achieve big dreams whilst being super conservative? So what is the importance of risk taking to our listeners? How do you categorize risk taking as a component of your success?
Oh, I just went to an event where Kim Kiyosaki spoke, and a woman stood up at the mic and asked her, want to leave my full-time career, which I'm very good at, make a lot of money, and jump into real estate, and I'm scared that I'm going to fail. And Kim Kiyosaki looked at her and said, well, why would you put yourself in that position? And it was just so clear. Like,
so simple.
Why would you leave your secure job and jump into something you know nothing about and think that's going to work out?
Right.
She's like, I would never put myself in that position. I would keep my job and learn what to do and do a deal on the side and build it up to a point where now the income from the new career is more than the old career, and I can now abandon. But there's kind of this belief that you can just dive into real estate and be great at it. You wouldn't dive into being a dentist or dive into being a surgeon. You study for 10 years to be good at that. It probably takes a good 10 years to be good at real estate too.
Yeah, it's glacial. Real estate is glacial. I can see that now, having been in it for as long as we've been in it. It's not this overnight success thing, is it? It's learning to use debt. It's giving it the time it takes to work out. And it's doing it in enough scale. But that takes, with the benefit of hindsight, Kathy, and you've done this, thousands of times. It's just not something that, and we were talking about you going on stage. You were talking about, let's say, your first syndication, your first podcast, your first book, your first presentation. You have to get started. You have to do these things, but it's very advisable, and it's always advisable. You had Real Wealth Network in the background supporting, let's say, this endeavor, and you had that endeavor supporting the other endeavor. And so you have a network of income streams that kind of are always there. You do not have all your eggs in one basket. That I know about you.
Yeah. When I started, that's a really good point. Rich was killing it in his coaching career. And I took my podcast and I spent probably a year interviewing experts. I then became a mortgage broker and learned everything about loans. Then I invested. And so my first deals were just, incredible. We were buying in Dallas, in like the hottest parts of Dallas in 2005, when people were looking at me like, oh, honey, nothing's happening in Dallas. But I had done the research. I knew what I was doing. I knew so much that what I was doing that when I went to Dallas to first invest, I met with probably 20 property managers. I probably knew more about Dallas rental market than anyone, and so it was a huge success. And then when other investors came to me, I talked about it on the show, and they wanted to use my team, I was confident. Like, yes, I've done this. Here's my tools, do this. Now, when I messed up is when I left that. Yeah. And so my very first syndication, a developer came to me, this was 2009, and said, we're finding deals for 10 cents on the dollar. Do you know how to syndicate? I'm like, I don't even know what that means. He's like, raise investor money and we'll buy these deals together. Well, I did enough due diligence on him that these huge commercial deals that we took on, which I didn't know how to do, but I did enough research on him to know that he knew how to do it. For 40 years he'd done it, that we were going to be okay. So we formed an alliance. I still work with Fred today. We're doing syndication still 15
I know him personally.
Later. Yeah. And his deals have gone great. There were a couple that we didn't make any money on, but the investors still did because we went through really hard times, but never lost any investor money. I, from my experience with him, thought I was suddenly an expert when in reality I wasn't. So Another developer came to me also with 30 years experience who wanted to do a wine village. Now, the idea was brilliant to have all these wineries, rent tasting rooms, and the cash flow was going to be huge. But the difference was he had never done one.
Yeah.
And he had experience in other things, but not a wine village. Now, what I've learned since then, and we did lose money in this, and investors lost money too. And what, I've taught and explained is we never done it. This was risky. Now, it could have gone really well. But what it turns out is that banks, if I don't know what a wine village is and you don't, banks don't either. Yeah. We had a lender, but by the time we got the permits to get this thing built, the market had changed and that lender pulled out and we couldn't find another. Yeah. So again, learning over the years, it's like that was too risky. So do I think it's like, what's my risk level? As I get older, I am far more risk averse because I don't want to start over again. I've started over several times, but I was young enough and I had the energy and I didn't own very much. So it was okay. It's like I tell my kids, what, you're going to lose $100? That's all you got. So what?
Yeah. You have nothing to lose.
I have nothing to lose. But now I do. So I think as people get older, they're far more risk averse. When you're young, you can dive in and take risks with your own money, not with other people's money. So those were the big lessons of like, what was I thinking? Yes, a very cool, sexy idea. A wine village. Who wouldn't want to be an owner in that? Yeah. But how many examples of successful wine villages do you have? It's too risky. So there's a line right there.
You know what, Kathy, we've always been a big proponent. I certainly have always been a big proponent of find your thing. Find your niche, and get rich in there. Like just find it, mine that seam of gold. And you know what? It gets boring. But this is going to sound somewhat almost like facetious, but it gets boring. When you find something, and let's say you're making 500,000 a year, then $1 million a year, then 2 million a year, and then 3 million a year. And I have seen so many people get bored. And then they go off and they start, they're crushing it in one boring little area. Just keep on repeating a template. And then they go off to the shiny object. And
that's me 100%. And I'll back to what I know.
Okay, Kathy.
You can do it, but, just know you're taking a big risk. Like, unless you're partnering, I got out of my lane with Fred because all of a sudden I went from buying houses to building them. I didn't, what I know about building houses, but I partnered with someone who's done it for 40 years. He knew everything about it. So I was able to get out of my lane and, by partnering. I wrote about it in our book, Scaling Smart. You can scale very quickly if you bring in the right people. But in the case of these shiny objects I chased with people who didn't have it, they couldn't back it up. That it was a super sexy idea. Yeah. But that's all it was, right?
I want to say before we move on, because I want to make this very clear. Kathy has been talking to us, so openly and so honest. But I want you, the listener, to understand that Kathy has made, and I know lots of them, literally tens of thousands of millionaires. You have created so much joy and wealth and financial freedom in this world that your honesty and your integrity, and I do the same thing. I wear my failures on my sleeve and I keep my successes to myself. But I want you to know how big a difference you've made in my life. I want you to know how big a difference you've made in literally thousands of people who have come to me and told me how the difference that you have made, that you have liberated them and the companies that you work with. So I just want to make sure that the listener understands that as you're talking about your failures, because we were talking about the importance of risk. What you're not saying about the risks that you have taken is how much success you have created, how many minds that you have educated and empowered to be able to take those quote unquote risks, because I don't believe that luck has got a lot to do with if you're healthy, you're lucky. If you've got all your faculties, you're lucky. If you came from this country, you're lucky. If you're smart, you're lucky. So don't think that there's no luck involved in these things, right? But it is absolutely imperative, in my view, to free yourself financially, that you take a certain amount of risk. But risk can be understood, to your point, right? I think financial freedom and success in real estate is actually relatively measurable. It's pretty easy. If you put in this amount of debt and you put it in early enough in your life and you hold it for long enough and you do it with enough veracity and scale, you just let time do its thing, you will be financially free. Would you disagree with that? Like,
No, that's 100%. Yeah. And thank you. Thank you for the reframe, because I did help thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people just change their mindset about that. That first of all, money is fluid. It does come and go. And the less we've been kind of taught that you make a certain amount of money and it's finite, and then you invest that finite amount, and that you're going to get a finite amount of income from that. It doesn't have to be that way. Money is very fluid, and it can come very quickly, but it can also leave very quickly, but then you don't have to stress because it can come very quickly. Any of us, if we lost our money, all of it tomorrow, we'd probably have it all back very soon, because now we understand how to open that gate. That's the difference. And I thank you for telling me. I do go to events and people do come up and just burst into tears because they're like, my life has changed because you opened my mind, and now I'm out of this finite box of I'm going to be lucky if I ever make 100,000 or, you know, to now millions. And
I think there's an inherent, scarcity complex that a lot of people have. And that scarcity complex then creates this very emotional relationship with money. I honestly think this, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me, I only really started to become financially free and actually enjoy what I've just said, enjoyed being financially free, when I disconnected my emotional reaction to the flow of money in and out of my life. I don't really mind if it comes in, and I don't really mind if it goes out, and I don't mind which direction it's going at a certain point, because I know if I press this button, it comes in. If I press that button, it goes out. And I just don't have this emotional relationship with money anymore. And I think that that's really important in order to grow. We were talking about risk taking. The risk then, once you turn off the emotional response to money, then the risk becomes not doing things. The risk is sitting at home and hoping that things are going to be different 20 years from now.
Well, that is the greatest risk, is, like you said, having a safe job. There's no such thing as a safe job. If you work for someone else, you're never safe.
Yeah.
You could be replaced at any time. So, Our
good friend Devon, we had him on a podcast, Devon Kennard. I know we both mutual friends with Devon's, and Devon said to us, it's like, listen, everybody out there listening, I was in the NFL, so I knew my boats were being burned. But just know, no matter what you're doing, your boats are currently being burned. But Kathy, we've got some questions for you before we start wrapping up here that we ask everybody at this point. So these are our key questions. Clark, do you want to get going on exit question number 1 for Kathy Fettke?
Yeah, I just want to make one point, is that, it left a big impression on me when Devon said that in one of our previous episodes about your boats may be getting burned and you just don't want to acknowledge it, right? You're in that W-2 job, and the writing is on the wall. Like they're moving younger people in, you're becoming maybe less relevant in your job. You just choose not to view that, right? And that left a big impression on me. And I think a lot of people, especially, I'm 41 years old. I think a lot of people probably in my age demographic are starting to see the writing on the wall, that 27-year-old that's really hungry that's coming in. And maybe it's time for me to start thinking bigger, start thinking about maybe I need to start creating more passive income, because I'm not going to be in this infinite job forever where I'm just going to keep getting promotions and making more and more. So anyways, that left a big impression on me. And, I know that at Real Wealth, you guys, focus on dealing with folks that are, a lot of people that are in my position. But with that being said, Kathy, talk to us a little bit about these are kind of some of the questions we like to end on, is that let's pretend I'm 23 years old. I'm in San Francisco. I'm thinking about, leaving. What is it that knowing what you know today that you would give advice to like a 23-year-old that's like, all right, I got it, Kathy. I'm going to take risks. I don't have a lot of money, so I don't have a lot to lose. And then at the same time, let's say you're my age, right? You're 41 or 42 and you're in a well-paid job, but you start to see some signs, some cracking in the armor. What type of advice would you give to someone in my position in terms of investing? Kind of walk us through those first two kind of stages of your life.
Yeah, for the young people in your 20s, just continue to live inexpensively. My nephew is a great example of that. He has a very high-paying job in San Francisco, and he lives in a van. He takes his 6-digit salary and he invests it.
Wow.
It's amazing. He's brilliant.
He lives in a van.
And, he took some really wild, crazy investments, and they didn't go so well in the stock market. And that's when I was like, yeah, if you put that in real estate, you'd be doing pretty good, buddy. That's just one example of, for him, it's fun. I wouldn't live in a van. Maybe I would. I don't know. But that's one way. Another way is when my daughter was 23, my oldest one, she came to me and said, Mom, I'm going to buy a car, and I said, no, honey, if you buy a car, you already have a car and your car's paid off. So you don't need a car. You just want one for your ego or for whatever, but you don't even, your job is like a mile away. You don't even need, you can walk or ride your bike. I said, instead, will you just meet with a mortgage broker, please, for your mama?
Yeah.
And she did. And she discovered that she could qualify for a $300,000 home. She lived in Chico. She went to school in Chico State. And so that was first step. Like I said, first step, she found out, wow, I qualify. And with just 3% down. So many people still don't understand that. You don't need a big down payment.
Right.
She had $10,000 saved. What's 3% of $9,000? She had the money.
That's it.
So she bought a house and was able to live in that house for less than it cost to rent. Fixed it up while she lived there, was able to sell it for about $150,000 more than what she paid for it. And then she came down to live near me in LA, one of the most expensive markets, and she had $150,000 down payment.
Yeah.
And she now is locked in as a mother with 2 kids.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, locked in to a fixed rate when everybody else is complaining about rent. So that's just another example, living cheap while you can. Now she has 2 kids. You can't live cheap with 2 kids. For your age at 40, it's not too late. I really started my investing career around then. So I'm turning 60 this year, and let me tell you, you will too. If you're lucky, if things go well for you and you take care of your health, that's probably the most important thing. And then your relationships, that's the next most important thing. Real estate is all about networking. So being a good person, network your butt off is all I can say. I went to every networking group I could. And that is how, and keep a good reputation, be good to people, and you will grow. You will grow your portfolio just from those things. But realize that 40 is not too late, but it will be too late if you keep waiting. So get into it at least by 40.
Yeah. I want to pinpoint one thing, Kathy, is that your daughter, the trajectory that could be changed by that one, just think she went to having 150K in equity versus a nice car, right? At the end, the depreciating asset that'll go down, X amount every year, regardless of how clean she keeps it or how well she maintains it, right? That one simple decision with that 10 grand turned into 150 grand. And I think a lot of the times people don't understand is that they look at it as just like, oh, if I buy it, then I'll make money, lose money, whatever it is. But the experience, she talked to a mortgage broker. She probably learned how to read a closing statement. She learned how to make offers on a property. She learned how to find a good landscaper. She learned how to fix a patch of roof when it was leaking. All those skill sets, nobody ever talks about like the journey, right, of going from one, because that next purchase she's going to buy, she's going to be so much more confident. And it was through your leadership of being a great mom and a great, financial role model to be able to do that. So I very much applaud you with that one simple piece of advice, looked at the trajectory of how it may have changed her life in a huge way, looking back like when she's 40 and looking back after now she has some huge portfolio, but it all starts with that first house as opposed to buying the nicer car.
And then your debt to income's all thrown off. So then, she'd have a $600 a month payment and not be able to qualify for a house. So thank you. Yeah. I'm proud of her for listening to her mama.
Yeah. Kathy, that's just great advice. We have another question because we really break down kind of life into 3 core stages of wealth building. Obviously in your 20s and early 30s, and then in your early 30s to probably 50. And then kind of 50 and beyond. Okay. And hopefully for a lot of people listening, once you get to maybe 50, 55, you're thinking about wrapping up work. You're not really looking to add more tenants and more toilets. You're not really looking to take on a lot more debt and risk at that point in time. You just mentioned that you've become less risk adverse as you get older. And that's normal. That's good, right? But there's a lot of people who are in that position where just because you want to retire or just because you want to do this or that, your expenses are, we've gone through a pretty high inflationary period. Your expenses haven't gone down. You still got to pay those property taxes. Your health insurance has actually gone up as you get older. So people still need income, and yet they don't want to be showing up in the office every day. And so, I really break life down into those 3 stages, that like risk taking, get yourself the best job or get into that entrepreneurial role. And then in your 50s, start investing, for sure. So that by your 50s that you have a nest egg. But then again, like, what do you do with that nest egg? So for us and for me personally, and for actually, quite honestly, an awful lot of the flippers that I know and the real estate people that I know who have made money, the goal is to, flip, make money, develop, learn how to build houses, develop, make money. But then at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be the lender. They just, that's the goal. Everyone just wants to, because they know the industry. They know the people in the industry. They know the flippers. They know the rehabbers. They know the developers. They know everybody in the industry. And there's one thing that the industry needs, and that's capital. And so an awful lot of the people I know, just graduate to that point where they become the lenders to the younger guys or girls. Okay. And so it's just a natural progression, right? What do you think? What's your opinion of what your older investors tend to lean into within Real Wealth Network? Because Real Wealth Networks is this vast empire. It's a global database of investors, essentially. And so you do deal with the 20-year-olds. You do deal with those kind of more urgent 40-year-olds, absolute urgent 40-year-olds. But then you also have a very, very, and particularly because these investors have grown up with you. They've been in your syndications. They've been in your deals. So what do you think people generally gravitate towards for their day-to-day income as they hit like that, not working, and they just want mailbox money? What do you think people graduate to at that age?
Well, I think the really important thing is to understand the difference between active income and passive income. Active income means that you're working for it. And that would be, if you're in the real estate business, you might be a real estate agent. You're making money selling properties. You might be a wholesaler. You're making money being the middleman, buying and selling properties. You might be flipping houses in the business of fixing up houses and selling them. This is all active. You might be building houses, or you might be a tech worker or an NFL star. That's right. Or a dentist. Yep. Or a doctor. Whatever it is, you are actively serving this world and giving your gifts to this world. And I can't emphasize enough that when you're young and just in general, we're all here to do something great. And so the goal shouldn't be to retire by this FIRE thing, retire by 30. Oh, absolutely not. Maybe have your expenses covered if that's what you want. Yep. But we are here to give our gifts to the world. That's right. And I want to just eliminate that idea that you can be in real estate just to retire young. Why? Maybe retire from the stuff you don't want to do. I'm never retiring. I love what I do. No. But I've retired from all the stuff I'm not good at. At Real Wealth, Rich has helped me replace myself with almost everything, so that there was one day I was like, whoa, everybody's doing what I used to do. I used to do, research markets and, be all the things. And now we've got a team for that. But I do the thing that is my superpower, like we talked about, the podcast and the educating and writing books and the networking and so forth. So as an investor, whatever your active income is, whether it's in real estate or some other skill you have, that should be your thing for a while. That's where you get your money.
Yep.
And then there will be a time when you're done with that. And I don't know when that time will be, but let's just say it's 55. Let's say it's 60, 65, whatever it is.
Whatever.
Let's say
Yeah.
it's 80. Then you want passive income. That's like, get over the passive income right now thing.
Yeah.
If you want serious passive income, you need to have several $1 million. So you can trick yourself into thinking that, you're going to save a little money and buy a cash flow property, and now you've got $300 a month passive income. Wait till you need a repair.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's gone. So forget about passive income when you're young and building.
Yeah.
Focus on how you serve this world with what your gifts are. And that is your active income, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And build for the future when you will need that. So what I've learned over the years, we did a fund where we had cash flow properties versus growth properties that didn't cash flow that much, but we knew they were in the path of progress. When we sold those properties after 5 years, the growth properties had about a 27% annual return. The cash flow properties had about 7%. So I just can't emphasize this enough. Like, focus on your career that makes money and invest for your future. And that investment is going to look different for you then. It's going to be maybe, like for me, it's going to be in the path of progress where there's tons of job growth and migration. It's going to be a newer property because I don't want to worry about it. It's my future. So It might be a brand new property that doesn't cash flow at all.
Yeah.
And I don't even care. People might hate me for this, but they'll see because it's worked. I may not even get a discount on that property. I've told you guys this for years. Like, you don't have to work so hard to get these steep discounts. Just get me a property that's going to be worth more in 20 years.
That's
Can
right.
you do that?
Yeah. It's so refreshing to hear this, Kathy. At the end of the day, investing is very simple. People go to boot camps and they go to this and they go to that, and it's really simple. But buy it today. It's not going to give you any cash. It's not going to change your monthly nut at all. It's really just not going to impact you all that much. You're making an investment, and you're going to continue to invest into that thing because there are going to be repairs and there are going to be this, that, and the other. But one day in the future, when you put like $60,000 down and you have a paid off $600,000 or $700,000.
It's going to be $1 million. Come on, guys. It's going to be $1 million minimum.
That's
with
right.
the way that we're seeing inflation. So get the property that's going to withstand time. That's going to be
right.
10, 20 years, double, triple, quadruple in value. Those little tiny properties that people judged me on when I bought in Dallas, where I got an like $5,000 discount or something.
Right.
They were $145,000 brand new homes I bought in Dallas in 2005.
Yeah.
They've quadrupled. And so it's because I was thinking for the future, not for the now. I've got a job, and again, if your job is flipping houses, it's a job. It's
just a job.
It's not investing.
Yeah.
It's taxed as a job.
Yeah.
So you better be taking some of that money and investing it for the future. I know people who aren't. They're flipping, and they're going, shoot, I should have held some of those. Yeah, you should have.
Yeah. You know what? Kathy, I've just taken 2.5 months off for the summer, right? And I tried to tune out. I've got 3 young kids. I think you know them. You have met them many, many times. You've been in their house.
So cute.
They've spent a night in your house.
Oh, they're the perfect family. They're
wow.
They're beautiful, just beautiful.
So we just spent 2.5 months away, and my big takeaway from being away is I could not wait to get back to work. Couldn't wait. So this idea, look, if you are a coal miner and you're going down into a dirty, sooty dirty, sooty mine all day long, and it's really bad for your health, you probably definitely want to retire. But for the most part, you've just hit the nail on the head. I think financial freedom now is just a freedom to not do the things that you don't want to do. But if anybody who has a curious mind is going to want to keep on adding value, I'm never going to retire. I love this stuff. That's why I'm doing this podcast.
Yep.
Kathy, I want to take the soundbite that you just said about 3 minutes ago. And when someone says, "Hey, should I invest in real estate?" and what should I invest in? I just want to take like the 60-second soundbite and I'm just going to play. I'm going to walk around with like a tape recorder, like an old school tape recorder. I'm going to hit the play button. I'm going to say, "Listen to the 60 seconds that Kathy just said." And that's it. No follow-up questions. That was like such a precise, concise answer as to why people, you said analysis paralysis and, which market should I do and which floor plan should I do and should I do 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms or a new house? And it's like, there it was right there. I'm going to say, look, go to episode 30 with Kathy and listen to like minute 58 to minute 60. And if you were thinking about investing in real estate, just listen to those 2 minutes. That's all you need.
Well, because it's frustrating to me, and I did it in my early years where, I'm going to pick on some cities, and I'm sorry for those who are investing in these cities, but let's take Jackson, Mississippi. It's been a popular cash flow market. It is a cash flow market. But if you bought a property 20 years ago, it might be worth the same today.
Yeah.
And you might have got some cash flow from it, but then you have repairs because it's probably old. And where are you? Now, if you did what I do and paid more than retail, I don't do that, but let's say you paid $20,000 more for a property in Dallas, your property you paid $120,000 for is worth $400 today.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying is look to the future of when you really are going to want to take that money. Maybe those properties aren't performing as well in 20 years. So then you sell them and then you get into the cash flow stuff like the lending or, you need a chunk of money. Or if you're a Devon, you're an NFL player and your time is limited. You are done by 25, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a young career. You take your millions and invest properly, or just even if you just put it in a bank account, that would be better than spending it. And then you can cash flow when your career's over because you have a chunk of money. There's kids that are going to there's trillions of dollars that is going to be inherited by young people, by the millennial generation and Gen Z. Hopefully they're listening to you and to me and are going to learn what to do with that money. So that when you get a chunk of money, yes, you can invest it for cash flow, but don't invest for cash flow before you have money. It's a waste of time.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Yes.
I want to reiterate what Kathy just said. If you're out there in your 20s, 30s, or even 40s, and you are only solving your real estate investments for cash flow, and you say, okay, well, what's the best cash flow markets? And to Kathy's point, Jackson, Mississippi's got great cash flow, right? You're missing the big point. You're missing the point that let's just choose a different Jackson. Imagine for a moment you invested in Jackson, Mississippi, and I invested in Jackson, Wyoming. Now, we both put, 20 years ago, we both put we both put like $60,000 down on a $150,000 house. My house now would be worth $2.5 million.
Yeah.
Right.
So it takes the ability to see the future, which is why I'm obsessed with it and why I specialize in that and follow all the trends. Because I want to know what's going to pop in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I want to know what infrastructure is in place. I want to know what cities are investing in themselves so that I'm going to ride that wave with them.
That's right. And Kathy, we are, we're going to close out in a minute, but we are both located in the Tampa Bay area, and Real Wealth Network has hosted numerous events down here in St. Petersburg and in Tampa, and we've worked together for over 10 years in the Tampa market. And at the moment, there's this kind of negative connotation out there in the YouTube blood on the streets world where people are like, dissing on Florida. Let me tell you what I see. Just down the street from my house. I could walk down there in 9 minutes right now. We've just announced a $6.4 billion project right in the middle of Central Avenue. $6.4 billion. Right? I see the most amount of millennials in the nation heading towards Tampa. Some of the highest migrants and migratory incomes in the nation are landing in the Tampa market right now. And so while people are out there ragging on Florida in general, it's not what I'm seeing on the ground.
Perfect.
Yeah.
More
It's
opportunity
always
for
the
us.
other ground.
It's sad how wrong the media gets it, but it is an opportunity for those who look beneath the headline, you know.
If you went back to and Googled 2009 media, like everything was like, don't buy real estate. It's awful. You know, you're going to go bankrupt. And now we'd all give our firstborn to be able to go back to 2009 and buy real estate.
2012, I was on Fox News debating Robert Schiller on that very thing, 2012.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where Robert Schiller said it's a terrible and dangerous time to invest. And I was like, I don't know what you're looking at. You're the data guy. Like,
Yeah.
Are you looking at the last 3 years? Because if you're just looking at data, sure, the data line is going down. I'm looking at something else. I'm looking at the cost to buy these properties versus the cash flow versus I won that debate.
You know what? And kudos to you, Kathy, since interest rates went up. So kudos to you on what I've witnessed you saying. I've taken a lot from you here. So many people out there saying it's just a natural progression. Interest rates go up with historically high prices, historically low affordability. So therefore, we're going to see a massive housing crash. And you kept on your position on the market podcast. You're like, it is not factually possible, given the supply, given the demand, given the Christmas tree size of the millennial population coming up behind us. And you were the voice. You were one of the few voices out there in the entire real estate ecosystem saying that. So kudos to you, because it was a counterintuitive position that you took. And yet it turns out you were the one that was right.
Thank you. It's been kind of fun to be the contrarian over the last 30 years, even with some of the people with more access to data than I have. But what I do have is boots on the street. And I think I've told you this during COVID, during all of these times when the headlines were wrong and I was right. That's why Robert Schiller debated me. He's like, I don't do debates. Oh, just some woman out from California. Sure, I'll debate her.
Yeah.
But what I have is people like you across the country. I have teams in so many cities, property managers that tell me what's really going on. Yeah. So during COVID, when all those headlines were like, oh, there's going to be, I forget what they said. It was like 5 million foreclosures in the next year, whatever it was. And then I'm putting on webinars daily with our property managers telling me the exact opposite. Yeah. Saying we've got wait lists. Rents are going up because we can't get enough properties for people. We can't build enough houses. And thankfully, our members at Real Wealth would listen to the boots on the street versus these reporters who don't know anything. And they trusted and they invested and they have made millions over the past 4 years by going against the grain.
And I was on those calls, and I remember you added so much value. And we're talking just for the listeners here, we're talking about March, April, May 2020. So these are the first 3 months when lockdowns were happening all over the world, and everybody was projecting an absolute economic catastrophe in the rental market. And you were the voice of reason yet again, because every single day you went out there to your sentinels on the ground. Literally, your sentinels were out there telling a different story. And again, this is why you've created thousands of millionaires, because you are that voice. So well done, Kathy. I'm humbled that I consider myself your friend. Thank you for joining us here today. As you go out the door on this podcast, Kathy, what do you see for you in business and in your growth in the next? You're coming up on 60. You're brave enough to say it. I'm 52. What do you see next? You're getting younger, so I don't know how you're doing that. But what do you see next? Is there another challenge? You're so accomplished, but what would you like to see as the next stage of your growth?
Thank you. Right now I see time as the great commodity. I think most people need to look at that time is limited and money isn't. So really just making that bucket list and spending time with the grandkids. I'm taking the kids to the Beer Pockets conference in Cancun, and just really investing in the things that matter. So that's on the personal side. And on the professional side, it's really mentoring our team at Real Wealth as they take the reins of the company. You know, Rich and I have really moved to leadership position, and it is very exciting. We wrote the book Scaling Smart about how to build a business that runs itself, where you walk in and you're just like, who are these people? They are like 10 times better than I could have ever been at any of this. So just kind of handing over the reins to this next generation, I guess.
Yeah.
And then also, as I mentioned before, several people have approached me about doing a women's mastermind to help empower more women into being just super savvy real estate investors, learning from my wins and learning from my challenges over the last 30 years. So I'll be launching that this fall as well.
Well, you are going to be incredibly successful no matter what you do. Kathy, I've had a ringside seat watching Real Wealth Network grow, and it is an absolute inspiration to me to see that you have almost retired yourself from that business, and how you guys have done it. I've been at a lot of your masterminds and watched how that company has just layered in and delegated and brought in so many talented people to the point now that the company is self-sufficient without you. Mind you, they'll never have another Kathy Fettke making content. How about that?
I don't know. Look at Leah. I mean,
she's good.
I would love to say that, but no, we have hired people that can produce perhaps even better content than I can. So it takes a lot of humility, you know, to replace yourself with someone better. It's hard, but that's what leaders do. That's what leaders have to be great at. And there was a moment a few years ago where I felt lost. I was like, well, what do I do now? Everybody, we've replaced ourselves, and Rich is like, whatever you want.
Growth is scary. Growth is always scary. And it's funny. It's just, as life goes on, it's not about the money. And I think my big takeaway today is what you just said a couple of moments ago, which was, it's really about the journey. All that real estate does is it enhances that journey. It liberates you from doing things that you don't want to do, but we always have to keep on growing because that's what life is about. That's it. And with that, let's wrap it up. Kathy, thank you so much.
Thank you,
guys.
Amazing,
Kathy. Thank you so much. This was fun.
So fun to be here with you, and I hope to see you somewhere wonderful like Portugal, like we did, or even just St. Pete. I love that place. You live in paradise.
We do. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Kathy. See you soon.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Look, we truly appreciate your support and hope you found the conversation insightful and engaging and useful. If you enjoyed the show, because there's a lot of shows out there, would you please take a moment to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform? Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners. And if we reach more listeners, we will have bigger and more interesting guests. So don't miss the show. Please go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We release them on Monday. And so until next Monday, we hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.